So this one's going to be a little different here. This is best case scenario for the Philadelphia 76ers this season, next season, the foreseeable future. I'm going to break it down a little bit. I want to talk about honestly just happy thoughts. We're going to come in here happy thoughts. Believe it or not, this one is a little bit more difficult to make than the worst case scenario, but that's kind of just life as a Sixers fan. It's much easier to be negative than positive. Okay, so the Sixers are down 2-0. That's okay. We traded Ben Simmons, a guy who is just underwent back surgery today, for James Harden, a perennial all-star, a guy who even at his worst is better than Ben Simmons is. A guy who is going to give us 12 assists a night. And maybe can be that turning point scorer that we need when it comes down to the second half. We haven't really seen much of it, but we have seen honeymoon Harden. We do know what he's capable of, and maybe there is a time next year where he can come back off of a full off season of rest and rehab and come back to the MVP form of James Harden. It wasn't too long ago that Harden was an MVP candidate. I mean, there was last year with the Brooklyn Nets. James Harden, with everyone else out, was giving MVP performances night in and night out, and was scoring and was just aggressive and quicker and a much better shooter. He had a really down year this year shooting. Who says that's not going to return back to normal form next year? Harden is a very interesting case. I don't really want to get too much into Harden because the way I look at it, it's more negative than positive, but that's whatever. We have Tyrese Maxey. So no matter what happens, really, this playoffs, we have a guard who is going to be relied upon next year. He's 21 years old, and he's arguably been our best player besides Joel Embiid all season long. He is in much part the reason why James Harden came as well. He is in much part that why this team was the number 2 seed before we got James Harden. It He has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, Tyrese Maxey is just, it sincerely has been insane. He has developed into a prototypical all-star point guard, an all-star shooting guard. He is a guy who plays genuinely perfect alongside James Harden's slower pace. Tyrese Maxey is one of the quickest players in the NBA, but he's also developed into a top 5 three-point shooter in the entire league, which is genuinely it's crazy to say. His development, I truly believe that he was a snub for a most improved candidate. I'm not saying I think he should have won it. I think it probably should have gone to Jordan Poole, but I think Tyrese Maxey was an extremely close second. And the fact that neither of those guys got it, I think it really goes to show how bad the media has been when it comes to voting, just in general. Outside of the MVP in total, I really believe it's just been bad. Tyrese Maxey is a guy who gets better every single time he goes out there on the court. He is becoming more and more aggressive. Game 2, he was much more aggressive. The shots really weren't completely falling, but Miami's a tough team to score on as a guard, especially when you're trying to do everything by yourself because you don't have anything supporting wise. I think once the Sixers can improve their supporting cast, and I think they will this offseason, I think there's going to be a lot of moves made this offseason. I think that the Sixers are going to be a better team, and I think Tyrese Maxey is going to be a major cog in this offense for many years to come. He's a guy who I will throw the max contract out to immediately as soon as it's able to be offered, because I think Maxey is a perfect clubhouse guy. I think his energy is amazing. I think he comes in every single day to work and is happy to be there, knows that he plays basketball for a living and wants to get better and wants to be the best. His work ethic is crazy. When you hear guys like Joel Embiid, who work harder than everyone else in the world, say that Tyrese Maxey is the hardest worker he's ever seen, that goes to show, and it goes to say a lot of things, man. I think it's going to go and help Tyrese Maxey become the perennial all-star that I think he sees himself being one day. I think he sees himself as being a draft snub, as he should, and I think he's going to come out next year and have another great season. I don't know if he's going to be a top 5 3-point shooter, but we don't need that. You know what I mean? We could take 38% on a higher volume, 37% on a much higher volume, than 41% on a lower volume, and I'm gladly taking that. Tyrese Maxey offensively is a complete player. He's one of the best finishers in the NBA. And again, the kid is 21 years old. Defensively, he is not a complete liability. He has times where he shows some pretty solid off-ball pest type defense, but I think he could take a page out of TJ McConnell's playbook maybe. And get like a weird steal a game. But Maxey's looked really good this playoffs. I think he's a guy who is going to be a major cog in this offense and defense for many years to come. I hope he is forever a Sixer, and I'm very grateful that Maxi's on the team. Going in deeper, a lot of our supporting cast, I think, is going to be moved this offseason, and I see that as a very big positive. As much as I like George Niang and as much as I despise Furkan Korkmaz and Danny Green doesn't have to be here anymore, I think a lot of these guys will be moved elsewhere. And Tobias Harris, as much as I've appreciated his play over the past couple of games and series, he's probably gone. And it's not even a knock to him at this point. I think he's probably boosted his trade value up relatively high compared to where it was before in the regular season. But we're going to have to move him to go out and get some pieces because we need a legitimate shot creator probably. And Tyrese Maxey, though, as one of the best finishers in the NBA and as one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA, I just, you don't know. He's still going to be 22 next year. I wouldn't mind going out and getting another guy who can create a shot. But we need 100% need guys who can knock down 3-pointers. If this series has shown anything, it's shown the fact that we just don't have shooting. Danny Green is not good anymore. He's just not good. We don't have a stretch five, which hurts a lot, especially when Embiid's out in general. We Tobias Harris has been better, but again, we need guys who are just known for their spot up shooting across the entire bench. We need more athletic wings, and I think that the Daryl Morey is going to go out and get more 3-and-D guys because we just don't have any. We sincerely don't have any. I like Niang. I would like to hold on to him, and I think we probably will, but he's a guy who is going to be a specialist in the playoffs. There's a reason why Utah didn't really play him very deep in playoff runs, and the Sixers just aren't very deep in general, that we have to rely on George Niang to be a guy on the bench. And as much as I love George, he's just not that guy. I think my best case scenario for the Sixers is us trading Furkan Korkmaz. I genuinely despise that man. Watching him play basketball every night, he is the worst player on the court at all times. He's so bad. He can't shoot. He's the worst defender. He can't dribble, and for some reason, people love him, and that makes me despise him even more. I think he's going to be gone. He absolutely should be gone. There's no reason for him to be here. And despite not having first round picks, I don't think we really need more rookies. Especially if we have Doc Rivers here, because he's just not going to play them. So I understand, and maybe best case scenario, we can do a sign and trade with James Harden if we aren't confident in bringing him back on like a 1-year deal. If he doesn't take that extension, that 1-year extension, there's no reason that we sign him to a contract. And I don't know how Daryl Morey really believes and thinks about this situation, but I think if there's a sign and trade there out there somewhere, even for a guy like Jalen Brunson, who is a worse player than James Harden, but a sincerely much better fit for Philadelphia, that I don't even know if it's a better fit, because I mean, as much as I love Brunson offensively, defensively, he's just not good. And having Brunson and Maxey, two undersized guards, that would be a problem thinking about it. But you get my point though, even if it's for like Bradley Beal or something, I don't know. I really don't know what the move would be. But if there is in some way a sign and trade for Harden, so we don't just lose him if we don't want to sign him, that's an absolute must. And I think that's the way NBA franchises have to be ran nowadays. You don't just let guys walk. You don't. You have to trade him for something. It's like the Jimmy Butler thing. In return, we got Seth Curry, in which we threw for James Harden, and none of that's ever happening if we don't just do a sign and trade for Jimmy Butler. And I mean, even if we're going to talk about this season, truly, before I even jump into an off season, as I've jumped into it for the first 8.5 minutes, I think the Sixers can win this series. I low key kind of have the Sixers in 7. Harden is so much better of a player with Embiid in, but Embiid has to come back game 3. Embiid has to come back game 3, and there's not a single player on Miami that can stop Embiid. I don't believe in Bam Adebayo's ability to stop Joel, because Joel is just so much bigger than him, and Joel's the best player in this series without a doubt. And so I think the Sixers can win this series, and I think Joel Embiid is good enough to take this Sixers team as far as we let him. Injuries, of course, it's so unfortunate the way this has gone down, but the Sixers are going to be really, really good next year. They're going to be really, really good as long as Joel Embiid is on this team and is healthy. And it's a really good sign. Like, not a lot of teams can say that. Not a lot of teams have a guy who they can just be like, yeah, we're going to be really, really good for a couple of years because we just have this one guy. Like, that's the point of being in the NBA. Like, that's really the goal. Like, you just want to have that one guy. Like, Chicago will never be that team. Like, Chicago will never be that team. They can have a really, really good year one year and then go in the lottery the next year because they don't have that one guy. The whole point of trying to make in NBA Finals is finding that one guy, because in reality, there's only like 5, 6, 7, 8 guys max in the league that are that guy. And the Sixers have one. And that's like winning the lottery. I mean, that's the point of our tanking. And as long as we have Embiid, the Sixers are going to be okay. It's just that I don't want to have his career turn out like Damian Lillard's career in Portland, where it's like 10, 12 years from now, we're like looking like we don't want to trade Joel, but every other city's like, Philly, just trade the guy, just trade the guy, because we've built such an emotional connection with this man that we don't just want to trade him. But at the same time, like, I don't want Embiid to spend his entire career not winning a championship. You know what I mean? And if truly 10 years from now the Sixers are still mediocre, I would send Embiid somewhere for him to win something, because I want him to win. I want Joel Embiid to win. I want him to be holding the Larry O'Brien trophy at some point more than anything. And truly, I think the Sixers will always have an opportunity to win it all as long as we have Joel Embiid on the team. And if Harden can return to former Harden, or if we can move him for something that's going to be really, really good and just a much better fit, we can go out and get more shooting. We can get rid of a lot of the lack of depth that we have, and just and clear some cap space with Tobias Harris. Bring in a couple of guys who are just 3-and-D specialists that don't need to go out and do too much, that aren't slow with the ball, that just know their role, and the Sixers can become more of a 3-point shooting improvement over the last couple of seasons. The Sixers are going to be good. They really, really are going to be good. And I'm not worried about it. I'm really not worried about it. This year has not gone the way we wanted it to, especially with the Harden thing and the Ben Simmons thing. It's been a roller coaster of a season, but the season's not over yet. And the offseason is where Daryl Morey makes his money. Peace.